So I'm going to go now directly to operations. I'd like to be able to tell you the facility operating budgets are providing some relief, and in the last couple of years they actually provided a little bit, but from 2008 to 2012, almost all of you were facing flat funding for operations. We've broken this down on our daily service, which is the cost of maintenance, custodial, and grounds, staff, as well as any contracts, and then planned and preventive maintenance that we've been able to pull out of your work order systems and document the amount of dollars per square foot, or in this case cents per square foot, that's being spent on planned and preventive maintenance. And you can see that from 2008 to 2012, the publics were completely flat. In fact, even went down a little bit. The privates grew, but very, very modestly, certainly less than the rate of inflation. But the last couple of years, we've seen on both the public and private side some growth. Some of this we think is benefits, growth of benefits cost, and some salary, long overdue salary increases. Not necessarily new people, but just the cost of doing business has gone up. In the case of the public sector, 388 to 413. In the case of the private sector, we went up from about 478 to 498. The other thing just to point out is despite flat budgets, we've actually seen some growth in the PM on the private side, public side, from 25 cents a square foot back in 2007 and 8 all the way to 30 cents a square foot. On the private side, from 32 cents a square foot back in 2007 to 42 cents a square foot. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you add 5 or 10 cents a square foot and you're dealing with 1.5 billion square feet, it adds up. And this is significant dollar from the standpoint that what we have found based on some independent studies of our database is that a dollar of investment in planned maintenance actually turns out to be about equivalent to $2.73 in reactive maintenance. So what we did is we looked at campuses and projects and cases where there wasn't planned maintenance and looked at the cost of work orders and doing those work orders in advance in a planned and preventive way versus the cost of corrective and emergency work orders for the same type of work. And we found that essentially, we've been telling you a lot of you this for a number of years, costs 2 to 3 times more to wait until things break and you're having to do them on an emergency basis. So those of you who are aggressive in investing in planned and preventive maintenance, we think you will save money in daily service in the long run and be able to operate with a lower daily service budget. Well, I said earlier that the growth in operations funding in the last couple of years was not coming because of the result of increased staffing, and here are the data to prove that. Take a look at the national average here on custodial coverage. We'll start with that. The national average coverage rates have gone up from just under 35,000 to now over 35,000 gross square feet per FTE. So the higher the number means fewer people. And as a result, there are either fewer people or custodians have not been added as square footage has been added. Remember, we've seen this growth in square footage. And so what's happened is you've just stretched your staff further, make them clean more space as a result of adding the square footage. You've added square footage but not added people. The public average stayed about the same, just over 35,000. The private average has gone up significantly from just over 30 all the way to 35,000. We also track cleanliness score that we rate independently on each of your campuses. And you can see that the cleanliness score nationally has dropped down a little bit from just over 4 to down to around just right at about 4.0. The public average is just right about at that level, and the private average has actually dropped fairly, not significantly, but certainly around 4.2, 4.23 to just about 4.15. That suggests to us, at least, particularly on the private side, some of you have suggested that the cleanliness level could go down a little bit and everybody will still be fairly happy on campus, and that people will accept slightly lower levels of cleanliness when you stretch your custodial staff. Maintenance coverage, we've also seen an increase in maintenance coverage. I think the same thing's happening. People are asked to do more with less. Again, less about cuts, but more about new space and no new staff. All of you have heard this story. The national average has gone up from a little bit over 80,000 to almost 90,000 square feet per FTE. We've seen that same kind of growth in the public and same kind of growth in the private. I know some of my colleagues in the public sector will say, well, things are all way better in the public sector, but interesting enough, in both custodial and in maintenance, the private sector institutions are actually at the same coverage level that the public sector institutions. They don't see much difference at all. And so, you know, these basically coverage rates are the same, and they weren't a few years ago, but they've changed pretty significantly over the last few years, particularly on the private campus side. We haven't seen any change in the maintenance rates here. The rate, we didn't graph that here, but our scoring of repair and rates of maintenance, quality of maintenance, stayed just about the same despite the coverage increases. Let me see if there are questions on staffing here before we go to the next section, which will be on energy and emissions.
Yeah, Jim, before we move on to the energy data, we have a quick question regarding the custodial trend and the scoring. What is the criteria for the cleanliness score?
So we basically take the APA cleanliness score criteria. We've kind of built them into a 1 to 5 rating scale for us. So we basically look at, create a scorecard that looks at the quality of the cleanliness ratings based on, you know, how are the floors clean? Is there dust? Is there, you know, papers around? How are the bathrooms? How are the common areas? How are classrooms cleaned? And we basically use a set of scoring criteria, and our staff looks at a sample of buildings, different age groups of buildings every time we go on campus.